Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. It's lovely to have so many people with us already. 42 people in the room as we're kicking off. It's a fantastic start, and I know lots of people are still looking to join shortly, so lovely to get started today. To those who don't know, my name is Matt Baird. I've been running the Social Housing Roundtable now for 3 and a bit years. And to those who recognise Sadie, she's been on the roundtable with us a little while ago and is joining again to follow up really on what was a fascinating session last time and actually showing everything that's come since, which is absolutely brilliant. A little bit about me before we start. So we've started, like I said, the Social Housing Roundtable has been running for over 3 years. It is and always will be free and open to everybody. I do want to say a big thank you to Alertical for sponsoring this year's sessions. And this whole enterprise is funded by my recruitment business. So I've been recruiting in social housing now for over 11 years. It's a passion as well as a burden, but it's something that I love, and I recruit nationally with roles at the moment from kind of surveyors up to chief execs. So if there's anything that anyone's either looking for work or if you're looking for support with your recruitment, please do reach out, because that does keep this funding and keep this open to everybody. I'm also co-chair of the board for Spring Housing in Birmingham, which is a phenomenal housing association and one I'm delighted to be a part of. So where has this all come from? Well, I always try to make sure we're keeping as many of the topics as broad as we can. And I was introduced to Sadie by a mutual friend a couple of years ago now, I think, and said, hey, you should get Sadie on the roundtable. She's done some brilliant work in the domestic violence space and trying to do something a bit differently. And we got talking and realised she lives about 20 minutes up the road. So we met in a coffee shop. And to anyone who's worked with Sadie before, you wouldn't be surprised to know she was quickly finishing off a meeting as I walked through the door. And as we finished, jumped straight onto another one, which is amazing to kind of see the level of work that goes into something she genuinely lives and breathes. And we talked about SheBeasts and what SheBeasts has achieved and the wonderful work that it's done over the last couple of years. And as now Sadie reached out and said, hey, look, we're getting more involved in the housing space. Going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing since and where we're looking to go. And it was an absolute no-brainer. So on this, it's my absolute honour to introduce Sadie Jones to everybody, who will do introductions and talk about the journey of SheBeasts and some of the work they're doing in the domestic violence space. To those who are new to the roundtable, please feel free, as some of you have been doing, to put questions in the chat and hellos in the chat and everything else during the points Sadie raises. And then there will be plenty of time for open discussion and thoughts and ideas sharing. So without further ado, Sadie, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, guys. And thank you for having me, Matt. And thanks for that really nice introduction. So for those that don't know me, I'm Sadie Jones. I'm the founder of SheBeasts. Who are SheBeasts? So first and foremost, I think Matt said it, SheBeasts is my baby. I literally live and breathe SheBeasts alongside a very hectic day job. And being a nan and a mom and all that other fun stuff. But yeah, it is like pride and joy. And I set up SheBeasts 3.5 years ago. I think we formally became a community interest company. Which is all driven around, I guess, my own experiences and that of many of the females I've, come across over the years that I've been on this planet. So we are a female-led organisation, and what we specialise in is supporting women through trauma recovery. So that can be domestic abuse, and then how I like to look at it is probably the ripple effects of domestic abuse. So it could be substance abuse, homelessness, imprisonment. So yeah, lots of different journeys that our ladies, or females, I should say, go on, because we do also work with younger girls as well. And what we do is we utilise fitness, nutrition and mindset to rebuild the confidence in these ladies, get them back to feeling good about themselves from the inside out. We help them develop and recognise the amazing transferable skills they already have, whilst hopefully teaching them a few new ones. And that's kind of where the passion came from originally. As I said, it's very much centered around my own experience. So I guess to set the scene a little bit, my background, I came from a very, I guess, trauma-based background myself. So I didn't grow up with my parents due to domestic violence being prevalent in our household. So, throughout my years, I lived in children's homes. I then lived in women's refuges. I had a baby by the time I was 16, also ended up in quite a violent relationship of my own, was then back in a mother and baby unit, have been through, you know, different kinds of supported accommodation. But I came out the other side. And that for me, I think, you know, one of the things that was always prevalent was kind of that fitness background and sports. And as I rebuilt myself, I then wanted to be able to share that with females that I felt had a similar circumstance, just to show that, you know, life either happens to you or for you. And I'm a big believer it happens for you. So taking those experiences and turning them on their head is what SheBeasts is all about. So as I said, we've been going for 3.5 years. Our signature program, which is the 12-week workshop, which I talked about initially, which is the rebuilding program, that's been running very strong. But what we started to find off the back of that is many of the women, once they find their new knowledge and, you know, start applying the fitness and the exercise and the nutrition, feel amazing, and they want to share that with other people and other females and their friends and their family. And anyone that knows me, I'm always kind of having a brainwave. So we went away and we looked at how can we make this the art of the possible for these females. And then we decided to launch an academy. So now we're in a position where we offer these ladies, those that want to, because some of them, by all means, I'm not going to lie, will do the course and be like, I hate fitness, Sadie, and I don't want to do that again. So it's not all the ladies that come through our programs that go on to being offered a level 3 diploma as personal trainers. So we're able to do that in-house with the women, which means we're allowed to keep that relationship going a little bit longer. And then I guess off the back of that, we wanted to be able to offer something a bit more unique. So my own experience, having lived in refuge and in mother and baby units, is trying to rebuild yourself, trying to gain a new qualification, go into employment when there's so much uncertainty about where you're going next. It's almost impossible. It makes it hard to concentrate. You obviously have people within the housing that you may be living in, they're in a completely different place in their journey. They're still quite volatile, you know. So what we want to be able to offer is almost a placement opportunity, and that is where the safe housing comes in. So for us, we will be looking at how we can offer our females an actual placement. So that can be anything from 6 months to 12 months. They are housed within a SheBeast home with women that have obviously got a similar background. They get the benefit of the initial program, which is that 12 weeks of redeveloping. For those that then want to, they get the opportunity to go on to do their level 3 diploma. We now have a partner in place that alongside SheBeast can offer employment, and that's across 9 leisure centres here in Birmingham. So we're able to offer these ladies employment as well. And they also have the opportunity to come and work back within the SheBeast organisation if that's suitable. But by us offering the safe housing, it gives these ladies a real opportunity to hit the ground running. They don't have to worry about, are they going to be moved on in 2 weeks' time? They don't have the, you know, different people at different stages in the journey. These are ladies that are all on a very similar path. They're ready to take that next step. And we just hope that it really changes the balance, because, you know, for me and many of the women that we work with, these ladies aren't looking for more kind of housing benefits, moving around. They want stability. They want an opportunity to show how amazing they are. And yeah, SheBeasts hopefully is helping females do that. And that's a little bit about who we are. And I've realised I've just spoke for quite a long time, so I'll pause in case anyone has any questions before I continue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm keeping. I think some of the things that I think would be really great for just the audience to hear would be from the conversations we've had about why it's. I think when you and I have talked, one of the things both with SheBeast and with the follow-on accommodation and everything that's followed is the fact that it gives people a chance to go to somewhere where maybe they might be interested in a conversation, but might not be fully there yet. And those conversations might be starting. And you've noticed through that community of people that actually that almost lends itself, it isn't necessarily they talk to you, but because there's someone else there who they do connect with, suddenly they find they've got more all-round support. And I think that's been one of the big successes and why, you know, something like SheBeasts has won the awards it has. And I know it's something that's been so empowering to you in terms of why you've continued it in the first place, Sadie.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to mention that a lot of our activity is driven by females that are maybe in a more fortunate position. So we don't just work with the ladies that are obviously going through a rough time or have been through a rough time. It is a community of females, all different backgrounds. What we have found, though, as you rightly said, Matt, is very often the ladies that will come along to our fitness classes or maybe to the socials that we do once a quarter, maybe something's going on in the background and they haven't quite got to that point where they've either said it out loud or they've addressed it. And it's a safe environment, you know, it's females coming together, celebrating all different things. You know, we have women celebrating all different things. It's not just fitness. I mean, that to put it kind of into context, the ladies who were on the last social were sending me pictures, I think at 2 a.m. from McDonald's after they'd been to karaoke. So, you know, it isn't all fitness, but it's a community. And I think, you know, one of the biggest things that I've recognized, having been in that scenario myself and from the people that I've worked with and my own mother, a lot of the problems stem from isolation, feeling like you're that only person going through a scenario, not knowing who you can and can't talk to, who you can and can't trust. I mean, if we look at statistics, you know, many females will go back 7 times. I mean, that's just a staggering statistic. And why? And that's because they don't have a community, because you've been living in a scenario for so long. That's your life. You leave it and you're like, now what for me? Who do I know? So you go back to what you know. So we want to change that. And yeah, the biggest part of what we do is community. All the other things are a bonus, but the biggest part is we're a community. We're a team. You know, even down to like we share, like we produce basketball kits. So when the ladies are all together, we're all in a kit together. We're a team. We're one. You know, we don't leave anybody behind. We send back the ladder. So yeah, that's a big part of what we do.
There's some lovely comments in the chat. You know, Susan had mentioned it's definitely a loss of confidence and self-belief. And Barbara, it sounds like a great idea. There was a question from Susan. Is this online as well? As this is a great idea for all that need this service? I guess that steps on a bit into what you can talk about next, which is, I guess, where you want SheBeasts to go.
Yeah, so we do online, and we also now actually do bilingual. So we have been recently running a project with Weights. I don't know how many of you would be familiar with them. We've worked with them for a number of years. Fantastic organisation, really similar ethos to us in supporting women through different journeys. So the program we run with them on this first cohort for this year was a mix of online as well as in person. And we also had a group of, I think, 7 ladies who are from a Chinese background who don't speak very much English, which is again something I've been shouting from the rooftops for a while, that community, fitness, we don't need to all speak the same language. It can be something that's shown. We can show each other that we care about each other. I can show somebody how to move their body. Let's not, you know, put people into little buckets of what they can and can't do. I mean, anyone who knows me will tell you that I believe we can do whatever we put our mind to. And that's what SheBeasts is all about.
Absolutely fantastic. Question from Lara. How are your services paid for?
So we have a mix. So as I said, initially, the very first model when we launched was very much around women supporting women. So if you're female and you can support, afford and have control of your own finances, and you can purchase our online coaching, or you can come to a class and pay for it, or you can purchase our merchandise. We take the revenue from there, and that's how we fund some of our projects. So we fund 25% of all the projects ourselves. We have been really fortunate in the last 12 months. We've got funding from the National Lottery, from Sports England, from Heart of England, from the Wesleyan. So we get lots of support from other organisations. And then businesses can also support. So you could sponsor a female, you can get involved through offering space to coach females. yeah, there's so many different ways that we look at how we can fund a project. For me, the first 2 years, I completely bootstrapped the business, and I begged, build, stole and borrowed spaces, begged people to let us use equipment, did it in the park. I'll make it work. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. And I think that's one of the things where, like I said about those meetings, when I jumped on and you were, it was just back to back to back. I was like, okay, fine, but this is how you make a business work, particularly when your passion for it came through so strongly. And I mean, you can see in the chat there. So Nikki Clark had said it's so important to help survivors rebuild and gain that self-belief back. Amazing work. Question from Lisa: is the fitness opportunities offered to the children in the families affected by domestic abuse family-friendly gyms to carry that mindset forward? So I guess again, like moves on to some of the other points that I wanted to hear from you today.
Yeah, 100%. Big believer that, children are our future. If we aren't teaching our young people how to love themselves, not have toxic relationships with themselves and other people, it's just going to continue, isn't it? So I think our youngest she-beast is probably Terry, who's our longest standing employee, who's been through the whole journey with SheBeasts. I think she might even be on the call. Her daughter, I think, is 5, and she very much gets involved. She's our mini beast. We then run a number of youth programs across the city, I think from 11 to 17. So we've worked with the likes of Urban Herd, Essence Youth, Breathing Space. So yeah, I mean, our ethos is around females and making sure females feel empowered. And I think that has to start from a very young age. It's the relationships that we are building throughout our lives which impact us. So, and that's, like I said, not just with people, but with eating, with what we listen to, with who else we communicate with. So yeah, it's a really important part of what we do. And we actually are just about to launch a new tool. So anyone who knows me knows I'm always getting another qualification in another type of fitness. So we're just about to launch something called Magic Boots, which are like boots, trampoline boots, specifically to try and catch the attention of teenage girls who are like, oh, I don't like exercise. Oh, it's not for me. So yeah, we're always looking at how we reach young people.
Fantastic. Yeah, Terry said hello, which is great, and is here with us. So there are a couple of points to come up that I want to kind of move on a little bit to the housing thing, and then, like I say, if anybody wants to dive in, please feel free to use the raise hand function or the react function at the bottom and raise hand. I'd love to hear from you. But I'll start with what Sharon McLaughlin put, which is a great concept. I'm a firm believer in well-being. We often, as practitioners, forget what a difference fitness and nutrition can make. What we put in our tank affects both our mental and our physical well-being. And Susan Healy had said, it's great as I'm currently reviewing our ASB and hate policy. I think this lends itself well to the number of domestic abuse complaints that are being handled within the ASB policy. With the work you've done with weights, with the work you've done more broadly, where do you think the gap is between what you're doing and maybe what not necessarily other support providers, but maybe what housing providers or local authorities aren't doing to breach that gap? Because you mentioned already, some people go back seven times. The numbers around domestic abuse are terrifying. I don't think it's still not given the news that it needs to, and I think it did during COVID. I think suddenly we got a lot more spotlight on it. I think since then it's gone a bit quiet. Where do you think that gap is? Why do you think maybe that it's still there?
I think the gap, I think, comes from, it's kind of like an all or nothing almost. So it's, you come out of an environment where you've been living with your perpetrator, you've got a home with them usually, you flee because they're not going to leave, let's be honest. So you go and you go to a refuge, or you go to your local housing and they find you some sort of accommodation. Whilst you're in that refuge, there's so much uncertainty anyway, as to, how long are you going to be in that particular unit? Are they going to move you on to somewhere else? Will they actually find you any accommodation? Will you have to try and find yourself some sort of private renter? There's all these different questions, which when you're in a scenario where you've been fearing for your life, you're not thinking clear anyway. You don't need all this other information just coming at you. So I feel like when women are being transitioned out of these scenarios, it's almost without even checking where that woman is in her journey. There's almost like okay, you've come into refuge, or you've come into this supported accommodation. You've got X amount of time before we need to move you on, because we're only allowed, or we only get so much funding for X amount of time, and we're just going to move you on without any.
Most of the rubbish when there's only 1 or 2 items. I think we're okay.
I thought someone was asking a question.
Yeah.
Where I think where the gap is having conversations with these ladies. So very often there's the assumption, I think, that the lady's ready to move into her own home. For a lot of these ladies, that they're not yet at that point. They don't want to be on their own. They maybe don't, they haven't, maybe in some cases, they haven't even told their friends and family what's been going on. So they don't have anybody to fall back on. So I think for me, it's kind of the in between your own home and the not wanting to be in a refuge or a supported accommodation. So you're kind of ready to face the world and say, this is the new me, this is me moving on, this is me on my journey. But you're not quite ready to do that on your own. You still need some support. And I think that's what SheBeasts can really offer these females, because our support goes beyond just putting the roof over somebody's head. And I think that's the bit that's missing. Yes, people need accommodation when they're fleeing, but they need so much more. They need to rebuild in a safe environment with some security, because it's the thing that they've been lacking the most: confidence, security, support. They've been without it for so long that they almost don't feel that they deserve it. And I think very often don't know their own rights. And even little things like, setting up direct debits, being able to manage when you get into that place on your own. Some women, especially, I find when it's cultural. So like in the Muslim community, it's quite common. In the Caribbean community, you get it quite a bit. Have never had to manage a household on their own. They've never done all of the things themselves. So to move them from, that environment where they were with the perpetrator into a refuge, into a house on their own, how are they going to manage all of those new things, as well as trying to rebuild themselves, and in some instances looking after their children or fighting to get their children back? So I think it's yes, they need a roof over their head, but they need that additional support as well, and they need to know that they have ongoing support, because I think that's where we get oh, I'm going to go back, because better the devil I know, because I don't know the unknown and I can't do this by myself.
I think that's I think that's really kind of highlighted some of the key issues. I remember when we did we've done a couple of sessions on the round table about domestic violence. One was to do with recourse to public funds, and actually some of the things there. And you mentioned about rights, you mentioned about understanding, and actually what can be done there. And another more recently was on gambling and domestic abuse, and how I think a lot of the audience coming along were figuring that the testimony and because we had somebody with lived experience come along was going to be, my partner was a gambler, therefore this caused it, which was true. But then also how they themselves got into gambling to try and escape, because that was the way through. And those are sessions that have stuck with me for years. And I mean, we can see from the chat there that Yasmin has said, I'm from an Asian background. I feel domestic abuse is a big taboo subject in my community. I think it is still in British white communities, but it sometimes it's accepted, sometimes it's not. I think that's an interesting one.
I think it's that cultural pieces, and I had it, from my own family. I think we're probably around the time we first met, Matt. I think I did an interview with the BBC, and my grandmother, who's of Caribbean descent, who's no longer with us, who pretty much brought me up, was absolutely horrified that I would talk about our personal life, our personal business to anybody. Not, this is what's been happening to us, that's terrible, but that we would talk about that out loud. And I think very often culturally, it's almost in the Asian and Caribbean communities, and in some African communities as well, it's almost like that's your husband or that's your partner. He's allowed to do that to a certain degree. It's that kind of changing the mindset that no, that's not allowed, that's not acceptable. So I think, there is a lot of taboo, especially in cultures as well.
Yes, and I think, as we get more multicultural, it's brilliant to hear you're now doing bilingual, but evidently that's something that you've probably seen more and more of as the business has continued. Um, Simon has said, are you able to travel across the country to deliver in-person sessions? Is that something that you've done?
We do. We started off Birmingham, but that, yeah, it kind of is my personality. I'm not very good at limitations. So yeah, we've done Stafford. We worked with Drake Hall Prison. We do quite a lot of projects in Leamington. We've got a very good relationship with a number of groups in Leamington. I'm in London very frequently. So yeah, we will go wherever as long as it's feasible. Like I said, I don't believe in the defeatist attitude. So we can get somewhere else and get the message across somewhere else. Yeah, of course.
Fantastic. And I mean, Claire has said, if you're wondering why victims go back 7 times, you're lucky not to understand the dynamics of abuse. And I think that's, obviously testament to those who've provided so much support to women across the country for so many years. Ladi had said there, good work, Sadie. I'm very delighted to hear about your work you're doing with women who are victims or survivors of domestic violence and domestic abuse. Are you working with any local authorities at the moment? And have you linked with the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance, who are working with housing associations and local authorities and ensuring that the processes and procedures recognise the journeys of victims and survivors? So I guess this comes into who you're working with alongside Waits and what's that wider scope you're trying to achieve? Because I know I mentioned before, but you've won so many awards and yet you're still continually growing and coming up with ideas.
Yeah, so we work with predominantly, we don't work with any local councils or governments. We just haven't got to that stage yet, although it is on my agenda. I've been banging on the door of Sharon Thompson quite hard. So I plan to. But we work with predominantly the refugees themselves. So when we first started, how we basically became, if you like, was I reached out to all of the refugees that I could find online and literally contacted them and said, this is my idea. I've been the lady that lives in a refuge. I know it works because it worked on me. And if it can work on me, it can work on anybody. I'll do this for free to begin with because I want to show you the methodology. So we've got a really good relationship with refugees. We've just started speaking with a couple of different groups that offer like HMO. So they sit under, so I think it's like you would class them more as private sector, I guess. And then they've got a number of HMOs. We work with the prisons. And now we're just starting to kind of spread a field a little bit more and trying to connect with, I guess, people that are potentially on this call that work in similar spaces, because this year for us is all about growth and how do we share our services with other organisations.
I don't think there's going to be a year that it isn't focused on growth, Sadie, but from the conversations we've had since day one. Susan had mentioned so much of the problems come from people struggling to process where they are and where they need to be. And I think, you said to me before, it's that I never thought it would happen to me mindset. And Sharon backed that up by saying you're at your most vulnerable when fleeing.
100%.
Moving to your own accommodation can be terrifying. Even noise heard can be frightening. I'm guessing these are stories you're hearing all the time from.
Yeah, it's
the service.
it's crazy, I guess, to think about the scenarios that some people are going through on a daily basis. And I think one of the biggest challenges you have with, and it's not only just domestic abuse, but it's very prevalent in domestic abuse, is it's an ongoing journey. Even me, I would say I'm, pretty well put together. I'm quite bolshy, but I still have, ripples of what I went through previously. I might like things can make me jump out of the blue that probably wouldn't make somebody else. Something can trigger me just out of the blue. It's an ongoing thing, and it takes a long time to heal. And healing cannot be done if you don't feel safe, and also if you don't know yourself, and you can't get to know yourself in an environment where there's just no stability, which is why we do what we do. Even down to, as I mentioned, like the socials that we do, they're really a big part of our program, which we brought in. And that was to just make it more of an open environment for any female to come along. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter whether you like fitness or not. If you are female, you are welcome. And I think that's the message that's most important for somebody when you've been through domestic abuse, is that you are welcome. There's not you don't have to prescribe to something. You don't have to turn up as something. You can be yourself. And very often someone that's been through domestic abuse, you've spent so long not being yourself, you don't recognize yourself. So yeah, it's really important, I think, to have the community first, and then, like I said, everything else is the bonus, because that's what's gonna, you know, prevent somebody hopefully from going back to that environment where they weren't safe before.
This episode of the Social Housing Roundtable is sponsored by Alertical. Alertical helps as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. Alertical's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Calls, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alertical works with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and landlords. In 2022, Alertical won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023 won Housing Supplier of the Year. I'm delighted to have them as our sponsor of the Social Housing Roundtable throughout 2024. The words you're sharing are so incredibly powerful. I can see nods, and I can also obviously see people deep in thought and really processing some of the messages you're sharing. So thank you so much. Joe Lumid said, 20 years ago, I finally fled an alcoholic, abusive partner. I was lucky enough to be able to go to a family member, but I remember how shocked many people were. They had no idea what I was going through. I worked so hard to rebuild my life, and improve my personal mental health was a huge part of that. Fast forward now, I have a neurodivergent daughter who has very low self-esteem. I make it my every day to encourage her out of the house to help her mental well-being. And during phases of engagement, she does keep fit activities, and these have always had a huge positive impact on her. I feel my daughter could easily end up, though, in a bad relationship. Keeping her in good physical and mental health is key to improving her confidence and self-belief. And I think this is probably something that you're hearing similar stories regularly, Sadie.
Honestly, I mean, one of the reasons we were fortunate enough to get the funding from the National Lottery is I sent out a questionnaire to the ladies that we've worked with over the past 3 years. And the response that we got, we had more than 40 females come back talking to how fitness or movement had saved their lives, not from the perpetrator, but had saved them after leaving, how they'd got out of that dark place, how it had helped them get through day to day. You know, just going, for some people, it was just going for a walk in the park. For others, it was going to the gym. But it's such an important part of rebuilding, is finding yourself again. And I think probably the easiest way to do that, outside of kind of all the counselling and mindset stuff that you can do, is starting to move your own body, starting to like your own body. When someone's told you for God knows how long that you're not worthy, that you don't look good, that you're not this, you're not that, you're not the other, it you know, it has an impact on you. So you have to just, it's almost like you're starting over. You're learning all these new skills again.
And along with that, you know, I think I'm going through some of the points. Yeah, there was a point Nikki Clark had mentioned. She's the program manager for DAHA and Whole Housing Approach. Nikki, I don't know if you're happy to quickly jump in and mention a couple of points on some of the points you've heard today, and actually a little bit about the work you're doing as well, because I can see from the chat you're so positive about the work that Sadie's putting together.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear from you, Sadie. It's really powerful and so important what you're doing. So yeah, just I mean, from our point of view, we work with housing providers and local authorities to get that safe accommodation, and both sort of, you know, but more on a longer term basis of people sort of putting down those roots and settling. And if there's anything we can do to work together, because we do quite a lot of work in Birmingham providers, then more than happy to link in with that around that side of things. So yeah, we basically our sort of mission, if you like, is to drive up standards within the housing sector, so that no matter what people's circumstances, whether they need that short-term housing or the long-term housing, or what that is, that they get the right response from councils and from housing providers, that those providers can also recognise the signs of abuse, because they have a really unique relationship with that with their resident, and try and get them to recognise the signs of the abuse and get that help in early, so we can help people escape, but also to make sure that then if somebody needs to move, they can move. If they want to stay where they are but stay safely, they can do that. We need to move perpetrator, that can happen. So whatever needs to happen really to keep that survivor safe, but very much survivor led. So yeah, I'm delighted to sort of catch up with you outside of this meeting.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to connect. And yeah, I think
Okay.
that's what's most important, isn't it? It's the collaborations, it's
Yeah,
people coming together to create that community, to create a support network that
yeah,
these females feel safe. And I did see a comment just flash up then about, do we support males? And obviously 100% this happens to many men. It's not just a female problem. SheBeasts, we focus on females, and that's purely because I'm female and that's what I understand. And you know, my mother was female and she went through it, so that's just where my experience lies. But there are many male organisations that do similar things. The question I think was, are we going to extend to male services? So one of the things we've been toying with, if you like, or an idea we have, is through the academy, is offering an opportunity for men and women to come together to learn together. Beyond that, I don't know how our services would extend to males. I'd never say never, but yeah, I think, you know, I'm a big believer in utilizing the best of your ability, and the best of my ability is supporting females because I get them. Do I understand the male experience? Probably not as well as I do the female, and so therefore I wouldn't want to position something to a man not having that full understanding, because I don't think I'd be giving him fair support. But I can definitely connect any man that's going through the similar situation with some fantastic organisations. So yeah, we aren't anti-men by any means, because there's some amazing men on this planet, but there is also some not very nice ones.
I think it's about understanding, isn't it? You've got to be a specialist in the area. If you're going to provide specialist support, you've got to specialise in where your knowledge lies. Kim had mentioned the trauma that I see in my homeless service is extensive. Over the last 20 years of working with this cohort, it was paramount that we offered more than a place of just safety. We have 2 counsellors that are in the service every week. Many homeless individuals are on the streets because of trauma, and this often relates to childhood and things that they have witnessed or been subjected to. If we have a woman come into our service, she is never there for a good reason, and we'll often see the street as safer for her than staying at home. Is this a similar narrative you're hearing yourself, Sadie?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think I said very early on about the ripple effect, and it is a ripple effect. And it does very often stem from childhood. You know, what you see, what you think is acceptable, what becomes the norm, all has an impact. And I think the homelessness issue, which is one of the reasons we're so keen to get our, you know, safe housing. So we've already got our registration and licensing in place. One of the challenges we've been having, and I think Nikki touched on that a little bit there, is some of the properties I've viewed, I wouldn't let my dog stay in there, let alone people. So it's that finding the right standard as well. But yeah, I think domestic abuse isn't an isolated incident, and I think that's where the challenge comes, is educating people that don't understand it, that it isn't just, oh, somebody got a slap. That's not what it is at all. It's, you know, a whole series of scenarios that then play and have an effect on this person's life. You know, the choices they make, the relationships they continue to have, how they then treat their own children, how they engage with their families, accommodation, that there's just so many different nuances that come into play. And until I think we start collaborating and talking about it more openly, and people coming forward and talking about their experiences, we will continue to have these problems. I mean, one of the biggest shocks for me was probably last year when we went to Drake Hall Prison, and they explained that this was probably, I think, 3 months into a new role, which was a domestic abuse officer. And I was like, sorry, pardon, what do you mean? And they were like, yeah, we've never had one before. I'm like, oh, this particular prison? And they're like, no, the UK female prison system, we didn't have domestic abuse officers. And for me, I'm like, well, why do you think most of these ladies are in here? Because I'm pretty sure 90% of them have probably come from some sort of abusive background. Oh yeah, but normally the probation deals with that. And that's the problem there. Somebody thinks that somebody else is going to deal with the problem. And I think it's our responsibility as humans to get more involved, to see what we can do. And it can be something so small that makes such a big difference to a person that's going through this.
And I think it comes back, doesn't it, to that piece around something that's come up so many times on this platform. There's been the word to accountability and responsibility, and knowing actually that sometimes someone has to take a lead and go, I will help fix this. I just need your help. Too often they're going to fix it. I'll help them, but there's no one taking a lead, and it's incredibly problematic. Paul has mentioned, by the way, that Jane Francis is probably the best person to contact regarding supported housing provision in Birmingham. So I'll make sure that gets sent over to you afterwards from an email.
Yeah.
I have had a couple of anonymous messages, which I'm going to read out and obviously keep anonymous in that way. It said, a friend I saw regularly in recent years said I was in a cloud. She knew there was something wrong but couldn't reach me. And I meant healing isn't always possible. Being permanently damaged is okay when someone has eroded everything you are. I think one of the things that I've always been able to talk with you very candidly about when we've talked about SheBeasts, when we've talked about trauma, when we've talked about some of the people who've utilised the service, is that it's not about necessarily rebuilding who that person was. It's help finding who they are now through some of the services and things that you share and that you work with. But I guess my question is that when you do support women who are feeling as this person has shared, it's that length of support that is so vital, because I think it touches back, I think, on one of the points you made earlier around, okay, here's a refuge service or here's a bit of support for a bit. At some point that drops off and you just go back to the beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's the bit that I want to hit home so much more with it. Like, I get quite frustrated, and my team will probably tell you I'm quite matter of fact. I just say what I think, and I don't really hold back. But you know, there's no overnight cure to healing. You can feel healed today, but not tomorrow. You could have 5 great years and then out of the blue, you don't feel so good. And by no means am I saying that it's the responsibility of like the government or housing associations or whoever to hold someone's hand for the rest of their natural born life. But I just think there needs to just be a bit more clarity for people around what their rights are, where they can find other types of support, because I think very often it's almost like, this is your checklist and that's it. But what if none of the things on that checklist actually relate back to you? Then what? Then where do you go? So I think there needs to be more of the collaboration, which opens out holistic ways of healing. If somebody needs a more prescribed route, then that should be an option as well. But I think it's that, yeah, talking and knowing that it's not a month or a year or a 10-year, or there isn't a time on it. You know, you can, I think a lot of people as well, you don't realize that you've been going through something until you're out of that something. When you're in it, it doesn't, I mean, it's bad, but it doesn't seem so bad because it's your life and you make all these excuses for it. Oh, you know, this is just what it's like. But then when you step out, you know, and it's like that saying, you don't know what you don't know, and you realize, well, that actually isn't how you're meant to be living. And you get an opportunity to try something else. I think then very often that's when the journey really begins, because you think, oh my God, I've just been robbed of all of that. And now I have to find myself again as well on top of all of that. So yeah, there's just so many, it's a really complex situation, and I don't think there's a magic pill for it by any means. But I think as a community, where we have voices and where we have the strength and where we have the know-how, that we should just do a bit more than, yeah, leave people to their own devices when very often they don't know what that is.
I completely agree. A question that comes through from Simon: does your physical fitness course also include personal safety and self-defense?
So we don't specifically do self-defense, although I was a kickboxer for a long time, but probably not wise to be teaching people to be kicking the way in that way. But we do collaborate an awful lot. So, I mean, for example, we worked with a youth group who were looking for somebody that offered boxing. So we connected them with a boxing coach that we know well. We also have a gentleman who, again, so we do work with many males organisations as well who offer martial arts specifically for females as well as for younger people. So yeah, we have quite a wide network. And as I said, if we don't have someone, I'll go out and find it for the people in question.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's realizing that there are networks out there, but it's getting them joined together and getting that support more widely offered. There's so Joe had mentioned that Julian House, all of our DVA housing and support services have a minimum 10% male provision. And I think that goes back to the point you were making earlier, that there are businesses which will support and help. SheBeasts will direct and support and help in that way. That's still help. And Yasmin has said that awareness of domestic abuse is increasing, but we still have a way to go to explain the effects of coercive control and financial abuse. We need to raise awareness of these in minority communities too.
Mm.
You find that, and it goes back to a point you made earlier, so much of what happens, unfortunately, behind closed doors, people just aren't realizing is abuse at all until it's too late. And yet you're trying to catch them almost right at the end of the journey. Has SheBeasts, I guess, spoken with those who are any success? Success is an awful word. Any stories, I guess, of catching people earlier on in the journey? When people realise of what's going on, do they tend to approach you kind of when things have got bad?
I think it depends on the group. So I think where we work with women, it tends to be either they've been through that and they're kind of on that journey in a refuge, etc., or they know something's not right at home and they're not, they don't have anybody else to really talk to about it. And we've had that happen quite a few times where, women have started our what we call our community classes, and maybe 6-7 weeks in have kind of disclosed and said, this is going on at home, I don't really know what to do, can you advise me? So I think with the women it tends to be happening or has happened. When we work with the younger groups, and it's crazy to think that girls at 14, 13 are already going through domestic abuse with their what they think are their boyfriends. I think there we have a better chance of kind of nipping it in the bud, if you like. Talking to them about healthy relationships, explaining to them, the outcomes of being with somebody that's already trying to control your mobile phone and you are both 13, or saying horrible things to you, is usually a telltale sign of what this person is probably going to be like as they progress, and this isn't an environment that you want to be in. So yeah, a big part of what we try and do is that prevention, but it's a lot harder, I think, with adults. And I guess as well, it comes back to, I think somebody made the comment about awareness. I did a session when we'd first launched with Goldman Sachs, and we did like a panel discussion. And off the back of that, I had 2 separate ladies, quite senior in their roles, who connected with me to say, I didn't even realise, but having listened to what you guys were talking about, this is happening to me at home. And it was, controlling of finances, controlling of mobile devices, controlling of what the person wears. But it doesn't necessarily trigger that that's abuse, because it's normalized in some instances. And there's also a stigma attached to domestic abuse very often, that people think it happens to those in a lower social economic background. It happens to anybody, any sex, any colour, any age, anywhere. It doesn't pick its victims. It can happen to anybody. And I think that's the important thing, that it's, made more easy for people to talk about it, and not for it to be such a taboo and shame for the person that's experiencing it.
Thank you very much, Sadie. Yasmin, I'm going to bring you in. Thank you for joining us today. Yasmin. Hopefully we'll get her just a moment.
Sorry, I didn't realise I was muted, but I can say it again, not to worry.
All good.
Sadie, I think you're so amazing. You've inspired me to speak today. I'm a very ordinary Muslim Pakistani woman. I am outspoken, a bit like Sadie. However, I just feel that, in my community, there's these women that wear badges, women who are victims of really serious abuse, and they wear these badges that they have something called sabr, meaning patience. Oh, but they're so patient. Oh, she has a bad husband, but oh, she's so patient. What I would really, really like to see is for a lot of the mainline domestic abuse charities, projects, I would really like them to do a lot of cross cohesion community work. I would really like to see that, because I just feel that, nobody's really brought in the mosques. Like, the men are the main attendees of the mosque. Like, have they ever been given a lecture on domestic abuse, like what it is? I think sometimes you can't change someone's behavior if they don't even realize that it's not an acceptable behavior. I think a lot of them don't actually realize that what they are dishing out, domestic abuse, they actually don't think that they're doing anything wrong. They think they're well within their right to be controlling their wife's money, to be controlling what she wears, controlling her mobile phone. They all see that as, because they're the husband, they're actually allowed to do that. So I would really, really like to see that. I've worked on projects before. I think you might have touched on this when I went away. The life after, when women recover from domestic abuse. I'm mentoring 2 women at the moment. They're slowly kind of getting their confidence back. Work programs, work experience programs. We need to bring a lot more public sector organizations in to support those type of programs. That would be really fantastic.
I agree. And I agree with everything that you said. And I think, again, it does come back to that, like, you don't know what you don't know. And I think
That's right.
culturally, there's a lot of things that have been acceptable for many years. And it's the norm. It's kind of, you watch it at home, so you think it's normal. I know for me, I very much, when I got into the abusive relationship I was in, my logic was, well, he's not as bad as my dad. That was in my brain the norm. Oh, he doesn't do what my dad does to my mom, so it's not that bad. Gosh, there's worse. So it's a whole learning curve, isn't it? And I think a lot of it comes back to educating people on what's
what's acceptable and what isn't
behaviour.
acceptable.
Yeah,
This is
100%.
why I was saying I think there needs to be, like, the only time ever that I've actually heard domestic abuse mentioned, like, in a Friday sermon. I went to Havering Mosque years and years and years ago, and the imam was, he was quite modern. He must have been like in his, like, maybe late 20s or something, and he actually spoke about domestic abuse in relation to the Quran. And he actually spoke that, domestic abuse starts when you raise your voice to your wife. That's when it starts. That is classed as domestic abuse. And the whole sermon was just actually focused on, your wife being a mother, being a sister, she's the mother of your children, how you're supposed to give her that accolade and give her a lot more respect than you're actually giving. But that's the only time that I've ever been party. I might be wrong, because I don't go to the mosque every single Friday, but, might be wrong. But I just think that it would be really great if we could have these cohesion projects going with the Hindu community as well. I've got a lot of Hindu friends, and, they're not allowed to talk about anything. If they go home to their mums, their brothers don't really want to know. It's just considered that once you're married off, and, like, that's it, you're married off. And I know that there might be people listening, even in our forum today, or if you discussed it, oh no, but modern girls are not like that. What you have to remember, the modern girls, some of them, they have either a father-in-law or a mother-in-law or a parent that has come over from the Asian subcontinent, so they still have those values, and they want to instill them into that young girl, that it's not anything out of the ordinary. Oh, men do get angry. Oh, you have to respect your husband. What goes on in your home stays in your home. That's the one that gets to me at the most. The ugliness of domestic abuse, we should not be hiding it. We should actually be trying to cure it, trying to heal it.
100%. I totally agree. There is the Muslim network, so maybe that's a conversation that could be opened with them. I do have some contacts there. We did start exploring a project a little while back with them, so maybe that's something we could do. I'm more than happy to connect with you and see maybe how we can get something moving.
Okay, brilliant, Sadie. Fantastic.
Thank you very, very much, Yasmin. There's a few points in the chat I'd just like to fly through before we run out of time today. Question that come through from Steve. Do you hold public meetings to explain how to spot the signs of domestic abuse in their friends and family, or have you ever spoken to convicted abusers about their actions?
So first question, I don't specifically do, but we do have one of our non-execs who has just launched her organisation, which does exactly that. So like the telltale signs, she also goes into organisations to talk to employers about that. And then there's obviously a number of different organisations that do that we partner with. So like EDA from an employer's view, and then there's a number of groups that do it for kind of your everyday person. So not something that we specifically do, but we can have people that come out and do that. And then remind me of the second question.
Convicted abusers about their actions?
No, we don't, but Freedom Project do, who are a fantastic organisation.
Lovely. There, in my opinion, this is from Sharon, there, in my opinion, should be no time limit on support. As human beings, we all heal at different paces, and services should be adapted to the individual aftercare. Aftercare is so important and often so overlooked. Susan said, I recently met a social worker. She's a survivor of domestic abuse. She was helping others in her role. It took a long time for her to recognise she was a victim of domestic abuse herself. And Sharon has mentioned we really need to bring more employers into this conversation. Lisa, what an amazing service. Thanks for sharing, Sadie. You are a real role model and a beacon of light for many women. Your passion shines through, and I absolutely love that we continue to raise these issues and have services like this to support women to rebuild their lives. Mark, really inspiring talk. Thanks so much, Sadie and Claire. A lot of this is passing ownership from one man to another. Simon, totally agree, Yasmin. I'm an ambassador for the White Ribbon campaign, which aims to mobilise men and boys to stand up against abuse. I do a lot of work with male faith leaders, and there's hope there for collaboration with Sadie. As we go into the last 2 minutes, just your final thoughts on some of the points you've heard today, Sadie, but also, I guess, a call to action for the sector and what we can be doing in the social housing space to support some of the amazing work that you're doing and SheBeasts more generally.
So I think firstly, thank you to everybody for their comments, and it's great to see so many people that share obviously a vested interest in getting rid of this horrible situation that we seem to have everywhere. How can we work together more? I guess just connecting. I'm a big believer in always keeping doors open, always having conversations. We run a number of initiatives outside of like the workshops that we do as well. So things like She Cares, which is where we get organizations or individuals to donate gym kit for women. Our socials, sharing them maybe with your like tenants and stuff, because again, very often people who are going through a scenario don't always want to just disclose to somebody that they know. So opening those avenues. And I guess, yeah, we're more than happy to come in and do like test sessions with your people that live in your accommodation, even coming in and talking to your staff about what we do. If we can help in any way with anything, for me, it's, I just see it as limitless in what we can do. And it starts with a conversation.
On mute. Thank you so much. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Obviously, LinkedIn is how you and I connected, but what are the best ways for people to reach out to you, Sadie, if they wish to follow up today?
Yes, so LinkedIn, of course. We've got a website, which is www.SheBeasts.co.uk. And then it's the same on all social media platforms as well. So you can go onto the website, send us an inquiry, drop us an inbox. We're pretty responsive. Yeah, just reach out to me. I don't bite, even though it's called SheBeasts. Thank
you so much. Sadie, a massive thank you today. I can see love pouring in from the chat box. A huge thank you for joining us. Next week, to those who follow the Social Housing Roundtable, I'm going to be up at the Housing Community Summit. If you'd like to say hello, please do. So there's no roundtable next week, but we are back the week after. But for now, just a huge thank you to Sadie, to everyone who shared today anonymously or publicly. I really appreciate it. It's helped deliver what I think will be a very memorable and emotive session for all. So just on that note, a huge thank you. And Sadie, thanks to you again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.